Inclusion and diversity in student mobility is the topic of the keynote, and it's about how we can remove barriers and provide opportunities for all. We have the president of the Erasmus Student Network with us. This is Europe's largest international student organization. Juan Rayón, a warm welcome to you.
And thanks for joining us for the conference. Vielen Dank, dass Sie mit dabei sind.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jeng. It's a great pleasure to be here. I hope that everybody can hear me well. And yes, I'm really, really happy to be here at the conference to present a bit our work in inclusive mobility, a core priority for the Erasmus Student Network. I have a presentation with a lot of data points. And I think that at the end, we'll also have some time for questions. So I also look forward to have a bit of a discussion with the audience. Now I'm going to share my screen, which I believe you can see. And well, when I saw this conference for the first time, I was really happy to see, like so much attention put into such a core priority topic as inclusive mobility, right? Because inclusive mobility is a core part of the efforts to make internationalization better and also to increase not only the impact on participants, but also the broader societal impact that internationalization has. So now I'm going to be talking a bit about how can we make mobilities the core activity in the Erasmus Plus program, but also in internationalization at large, more inclusive. So we can one day hopefully achieve that dream of making higher education mobilities a reality for all. The Erasmus Student Network, which also, as has been saying now, is the largest international student network in Europe, has been working in the topic of inclusion of people, not only with disabilities, but also with fewer opportunities in mobility for some time now. We have done this through several projects, including SIM, which is the main project that I will be presenting now, but also through our own research, such as the latest edition of the ESN survey that you can already access on our website. We have also focused on the topic of disability, but today I'm going to be focusing more on the broader perspective of students with fewer opportunities. But if you want to learn a bit more about our work related to disability, you can also check the inclusivemobility.eu platform or the outputs of the EPFIME project. So to tell you a bit about this SIM project, the Social Inclusion and Engagement in Mobility, that has been a transformational moment for our work in inclusive mobility. The SIM project had three main objectives: widening participation of students coming from disadvantaged groups, increasing interaction with local communities, that for us is also a core aspect of inclusion, and in general, making the Erasmus Plus program more inclusive. And the findings that I'm going to be showing mainly come from this research report, but also others from the ESN survey report that I mentioned before. To tell you a bit about who did we survey, what are the students that gave us all this really valuable data, you can see that we managed to get a very good sample with more than 12,000 answers coming from many different countries and also from many different backgrounds. And what is really, really interesting is that we didn't only survey mobile students, but we also had a very big control group with 35% of non-mobile students that answer our survey. That allows us to compare both groups and to see the differences. Besides the data from the general report, we also have specific data from different groups, which is really valuable for higher education institutions or other stakeholders when you try to target a bit more your measures to support inclusive mobility. You can see here the 5 core groups, and the specific analysis for each one can be found in our website with the simproject.eu. And besides the first analysis, we're also working on follow-up measures with the national data that will be accessible very, very soon also on our webpage. Let's start talking a bit about the main barriers to student mobility that we have identified. Through our research, we have tried to develop this new social model to inclusive mobility, in which instead of focusing on the impairments that normally we discuss when talking about mobility, we focus on the barriers that the students face, and more specifically on how we can remove these barriers to allow all kinds of students to participate in mobility regardless of their background. And when we started to see the different trends in the data, we developed this model focusing on 3 barrier types: institutional, environmental, and attitudinal. And this is a scheme that each institution can develop also internally, thinking about how these 3 barriers are related to your own reality. When we talk about institutional barriers, we talk about barriers that are connected to the programs and the regulations that we have in place, and that also impact us access in aspects such as access to grants, recognition, and other elements that are quite connected with the institutional setting of mobility programs. Then we have the environmental barriers, and those are connected with those societal factors that also affect the potential participation in mobility. We know this very well because these are the ones connected to the family background, the personal background in terms of friendships, whether other friends have been on mobility, and also in general to the access to information, which is a core part of widening participation in mobility. And last but not least, quite interconnected with the previous two, we have attitudinal barriers that are about the belief system of the students and that can be given an example through the typical sentence that we have all heard of, no, I think that mobility is not for me. I think that I am not the type of person who can do this experience. But now moving to the more specific data on the barriers that the students reported and how they connect with the three ones, three building blocks that we identify, you can see here the categorization that the students gave. For mobile participants, financial elements continue to be the main barrier. Financial elements that are not only about the quantity of the grants, and this is very important when we talk about inclusive mobility, but also about the timing, about how the grant models are structured, how the grants are given to students, how do we make sure that the students get their grants on time. Then there is a clear intersection between recognition related elements and financial elements, because if students do not get their recognition, they're going to have to extend their degree program, they're going to have to have a longer bachelor, longer master's, that will in the end result on higher costs. So you can see that those appear here quite clearly. And then of course the opportunity cost, right? This is why it's so important to have higher grants, because students also consider opportunity cost. It's not only about the grant that I get, it's about the income that I will stop receiving if I stop working, for instance, as I was doing maybe when I was a student in my local community. And then we also have those personal elements that appear, but are a bit less significant than the ones that we mentioned before. So what is the comparison with non-mobile students? Well, there are similar patterns, but there are also differences because, of course, non-mobile students focus more on the broader financial picture, as you can see here. Insufficient funding to support period abroad appears clearly, followed by, once again, these ideas related to the lack of flexibility, in which students are a bit afraid that they will not get the recognition, they will have to extend their degrees, their professors are not giving them enough guidance on how to do it, and therefore they are afraid of making that decision of going abroad. And then also something that is crucial and that affects specifically students on free opportunities is the amount of concerns that they have about impact on their academic achievement, because they believe that it's super important to keep, with the level of scores, the level of grades, to make sure that their employability doesn't suffer. And many of them report this to be a concern. Others appear, such as lack of knowledge of the opportunities, that continues to be a problem for a big number of students, and also others related to recognition or the unsuccessful application, which is still a considerable factor and shows that there are not enough opportunities yet. Just to give you a bit more data on this element of the late payments of grants, this is a problem that, of course, differs a lot depending on the country. And I'm also happy to come with good news that I have already shared with colleagues from the DAAD, which is that Germany scores quite well. Of course, there is still room for maneuver, but compared to other European countries, the Erasmus Plus grants and mobility grants are paid mostly on time in Germany. Unfortunately, this doesn't mean that they are paid in advance as we believe it should be the case, but at least they don't suffer the same delays they do in other mostly South European countries. Then another thing that came not only from the quantitative research, but also from the focus groups that we did, is that bureaucracy poses a very important challenges for students with opportunities because they feel less confident to navigate the process of applying to go abroad. So also something that we should consider. What can we do? Because it's important to also come with some ideas and not only show the problems. Well, we believe that the current Erasmus architecture is actually fit, to have the necessary changes to make the program more inclusive in terms of grants. There are a couple of things we can do. The first one is to try to overhaul the scholarship system, making pre-financing of mobility the norm. And I know that many of you in higher education institutions already do that, and that's definitely the way forward, to make sure that very soon all students receive their grants before the mobility starts, but also changing a bit more the scholarship system, because as you know, differences of prices at the moment are more connected to the cities than to the countries. So it's more important to analyze the cities in which the students are going than the countries themselves. And this is something that maybe can be done through more flexibility for higher education institutions to allocate grants. Then, as I said before, it's not only about the quantity of the money, it's also about how we inform, also about how we run our administrative processes. And what is clear is that many students do not really understand where grants come from. And this information is actually quite important because students, in order to make the decision to go abroad, should know how much money they're going to get, when the money is going to arrive, even how, let's say, the composition of the money is structured. This data comes from the last year of the previous program, so it doesn't still analyze the new top-ups, but it's quite stark to see that more than 12% of students reported not knowing if they were getting top-up grants or not, showing that there is still work to do in terms of dissemination. As I told you before, we see that recognition continues to be a challenge. Recognition is normally considered more a general implementation problem rather than an inclusion issue. But what we see when we compare the data is that, as I said, these recognition problems affect specifically students of foreign opportunities because they deter them from going abroad and they present specific challenges that also require more attention to how the agreements are made and how communication works between higher education institutions. You can see the numbers. There are, of course, big differences between countries, but what is clear is that a very important number of students report not getting full recognition. And of course, this is connected to a number of things, such as the satisfaction with the whole mobility experience. And here we see something quite interesting when we compare our data with data from previous years. We see that the overall satisfaction with recognition among mobile students has increased. So those students who go abroad are generally more satisfied, but taking into account the same data, we also see that non-mobile students are more and more afraid of not getting their credits recognized, having to prolong their stays, etc. So that lack of recognition in many cases has those adverse effects among the non-mobile population. Besides the quantitative data, we also gather a lot of testimonials and a lot of comments through open boxes, what are quite useful to get a better understanding of the exact problem. Here you can see some examples, and we can clearly see some trends. I like this comment, just it's a bit funny, right? But unfortunately, this is what some students face, in which a student was told something such as Italy is less serious as a kind of excuse for not getting recognition, right? So that trust building between higher education institutions is fundamental. This is why we have the Bologna tools, ECTS, to make sure that we focus on learning outcomes instead of this kind of a specific transcript of courses with the same name that poses a big problem for students. But you can see also here some elements related to let's say a lack of proper implementation of Bologna tools such as ECTS, and we believe that with more focus, and I'm really happy to see that also DAAD is working a lot on this topic, with training courses about Bologna tools, this could be improved. Now moving to student support, a fundamental element in the preparation of students and also in empowering students to make the final decision to go abroad. We also ask students what were the most important support initiatives that universities could do to convince them to go abroad. And here we see three that clearly stand out. The first one will not come as a surprise, is information about available funding. And then two of them that really require attention, which are the support with the application process, making sure that we help students to navigate both the administrative and also, let's say, the personal dimension of applying to go mobility, and something that is quite interesting, which is the help choosing a university. And this is when we move from merely talking about administration to talk more about guidance. Students need that kind of guidance because for students, understanding the conditions of the potential host university is going to be really important if they have specific needs and they are not sure whether those needs will be supported in when they go on their mobilities. Something to consider that whenever we talk about mobility and inclusive mobility is not only about the sending institution and the measures that institution puts in place, but also the hosting institution. And then you can see that there are still many things in which there is room for improvement. We see that 56% of students were not offered an activity with fellow students that has this peer-to-peer component, and that 83% indicated that they would like to discuss with peers in a more social setting. So combining information provision with more exchange with peers is also quite important to ensure that students feel prepared. About that, just to elaborate a bit more on this dimension of the role of the hosting institutions, what we see a lot is now in the debate about inclusive mobility, there are lots of attention to the role of sending institutions, but actually, just like the movie title says, it takes two to tango. We also need to focus on measures to support incoming students and also to try to have that kind of race to the top in terms of which universities are better at offering support services to incoming students. This is also something you can consider to reflect on whether you also have your own targets related to becoming a better institution in terms of welcoming students from your opportunities, how you can extend as many benefits as possible to exchange students, etc. And related to the provision of information, we recently launched something that we believe is going to be quite helpful for students to kind of also compare the different grants and understand the context, which is our Erasmus Plus Grant Simulator, which is available at our Erasmus Generation portal, in which students can check the grants of different countries and see how they compare with each other. Then another key element related to the support is the reassurance about the support while abroad. And this is something in which both the sending institution and the hosting institution have a key role to play, and also the communication between both. Something that we clearly saw in the focus groups is that students of your opportunities backgrounds are really concerned about what can possibly happen during their mobilities and not knowing how to proceed. This can be related to health concern, psychological elements. So in the pre-departure and promotion phase, being able to properly explain to them which support measures are in place in terms of the hosting institution and the sending institution, how would you react to an emergency, who can you contact, who are your main support points, is probably going to make a big difference also, in making them feel more prepared and more secure before making their mobility experience. Then, when it comes to the experience of the students, the challenges that they face and the impact that it has, we also got some data from our latest ESN survey on the main issues encountered on mobility. And here we see also the effects of the pandemic that were already being discussed in previous sessions. We see that feelings of stress and feelings of anxiety start to emerge as more prominent problems in our latest research, also showing the importance of mental health support to students while they are abroad. It can be provided from both the sending institution and the hosting institution. And also that other elements that we know well, such as the problems with the courses, continue to appear. And you can see that even feelings of social exclusion appear, of course, not among all the student population, but among quite a considerable number of students. So that kind of reassurance and that kind of integration process is also going to be very important to ensure quality experience among the students. Then, what are the perceptions of students among their equal treatment, which is a fundamental part of the Erasmus experience? Well, among the fewer opportunities group, we see that 34% of students felt that they were treated differently or unfairly at their host university. This number is way higher among the fewer opportunities group than among the general student population, because we have data from different surveys comparing both. And 15% shared that they felt that they did not have equal access to resources and opportunities. So of course, this says that a majority did not feel this way, but still a very significant number reported these problems, and we should definitely consider. A vast majority have positive experience while abroad, which is also this kind of a positive dimension that we should always keep in mind, because the experiences are extremely important among the student group, and the benefits reported are even higher than among the general student population. Something that has been also widely discussed in the inclusive mobility field, let's say, is the importance of multipliers, ambassadors, making sure that we replicate the experiences, especially of those students that come from underrepresented groups in mobility. And actually, what we see from our data is that the students are keen on becoming multipliers and they want to support their peers after their mobility. But unfortunately, they do not always feel encouraged by their higher education institutions. They report that many of them don't feel that they got that kind of push to become those kind of multipliers after their mobility. So also something that you can consider in your institutional strategies, how we can work more on this multiplier element, on training our students, involving them in promoting mobility. Of course, here we believe that the most effective way of doing so is through student associations, right? Like student associations that can be involved in buddy systems, mentorship groups, because they offer also institutional retention, internal development, and they can work on different projects together with the universities. Then this is a bit the overview of, let's say, the state of play in terms of inclusive mobility. Since I have limited time and I didn't want to also bother you with so many new things, I'm just leaving you here our technical recommendations from the Social Inclusion and Engagement in Mobility, in which we basically try to offer technical responses to the challenge that they have just presented. The idea behind these recommendations was to move a bit beyond the usual kind of proposals that are made in the internationalization field that tend to be a bit more general and focus more on program changes that can be made at the European, national, and also institutional level. So please make sure to check this document. We are really proud of it, and we have already had the opportunity to discuss it with colleagues from DAAD and other national agencies, and we would be really happy to engage also in conversations with you. That was it from my side. Thank you so much. I hope I didn't take more time than expected. And now I'm really happy to take your questions and to have a little discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear Juan. I have a look if there are any questions from the audience. Caroline hat gerade noch mal die Hand hochgehoben. So there was a hand sign from Caroline. Maybe we can put her on the digital stage to ask your questions, and Julia as well. I do have also the chat on my mind. Ich sehe auch den Chat, liebe Zuschauende, also schreiben Sie gerne Ihre Fragen. Aber gerne, Caroline, was wäre Ihre Frage?
What's your question, Caroline?
Hallo, es war gar kein Handzeichen, Entschuldigung.
Hello, I did not raise my hand. I just wanted to clap. I just wanted to clap. Okay, all right. Julia, you also raised your hand. Maybe that was also applause. Julia, what was your question?
Okay, dann schauen wir noch mal kurz
Well,
zurück. Ich habe eine Frage.
I have a
Aus
question.
dem Chat. I've got one question or several questions now, Juan, in our chat. So thanks again for posting your questions in our chat. What is the highest priority to remove the barriers? That's one question that came up.
That's a very good question, actually. I mean, like, based on the data, I would say that the highest priorities are for sure to improve the way in which financial support is allocated. I would say that from our side, since, of course, it is more difficult to get even more money, if I would have to point to one thing, let's say my short-term dream for making mobility more inclusive is to make sure that Erasmus grants are always paid before the mobility. That's for sure something really clear and easy and targeted that can be done. And to focus a bit more on this kind of recognition systems that I believe, like we have discussed a lot in the last few years, but continue to pose a problem and really depend on that collaboration between academics, administrators, etc., in the university. So these are two things that I would like to point out that hopefully we can work more in the future.
Thank you. Another question, what should DAAD prioritize in these discussions?
What should DAAD prioritize in
What should DAAD prioritize in these discussions? So that's also something that came up here.
Yes, that's
And
a very
then-
good question. Should I answer or wait for the
Yes,
next one?
please. Yes.
Okay, yes. Oh, that's a very good one. I have to say, and I have to congratulate my colleagues from DAAD because I believe DAAD is already a front runner in terms of inclusive mobility. But I would like to mention one that I had the opportunity to discuss with some colleagues from the agency, which is the possibility of offering new incentives in terms of organizational support to sending institutions and possibly hosting institutions in terms of activities related to inclusive mobility in the institutions. So for those that follow a bit more Erasmus+, there are these kind of unit costs for organizational support that at the moment do not really foster innovation that much. And we propose in our recommendations trying to allocate kind of small amounts of money when universities propose small projects or campaigns related to inclusive mobility. So that can be an idea, but once again, I think that many of the elements related to financial support that the idea is doing can be really good to implement also in other countries.
Ich habe ein Handzeichen von Cynthia Lane Pfeiler. Kommen Sie gerne auf die digitale Bühne. So please join us with your hand sign on our digital stage with your question to Juan.
Hallo, ja, ich habe tatsächlich keine Frage, sondern eigentlich
I don't have a question.
Anmerkungen.
Rather, I have a comment.
Moment, so. Und zwar, Ich spreche zwar später noch mal als oder
I
ich
will
tauche später noch mal auf als
appear
Erstakademikerin,
later
weil ich auch DAAD
as the
Korrespondent bin, aber ich
first
möchte gerade einfach nur deutlich machen, wie
generation
sehr ich mich gerade verstanden
student,
gefühlt habe,
but I just want to
weil
express
in
how
Thüringen
well
gibt es
I
Dinge,
have
die tatsächlich
felt
merkwürdig
understood,
jetzt gerade
because
aufkommen
there are
und
some barriers that
ich
only came to my
emotional,
mind
jetzt
now.
gerade von
I'm becoming
Gesprächen
very
geworden sind.
emotional here now.
Genau, eben zum Beispiel der Punkt,
For
dass man
example, the
offenlegen
point
muss,
that you have to
wie die Finanzierung läuft,
show
denn mir war sehr spät erst klar,
how financing works,
dass
because
im
I
Modell
only
Erasmus
learned at a
wir
very
uns
late
auch
point in
nach
time
meiner Ankunft
that
schon
I will
finanziert haben.
receive the
Das war
Erasmus
natürlich
grant
blöd.
at the earliest 4
Ähm,
weeks after
und
my
ohne
arrival,
diese
and that might be
Auslandsbasis wäre
a
es für mich
real burden.
überhaupt
And
nicht möglich
without
gewesen.
my
Auch
German
der Punkt der
grant for
Beteiligung
studies abroad, it wouldn't have worked at all. And
genau,
mental
Dinge
health,
unterstützen,
well, I fully
das wäre
support
mir
that
davor
aspect.
nicht so klar gewesen, dass
I
man
was
danach
not
fragen
aware
kann,
of
dass
that people could ask about that.
dass es durchaus eine Unterstützung ist,
There is a
die zu
support
wenig Beachtung bekommt,
that
weil
is
man
not taken
nicht
sufficiently in consideration, because
diesen Prozess,
nobody
das zu organisieren
knows
und zu
that
ermöglichen, weil man
organizing
daran
this
glaubt,
and
diese Auslandserfahrung
getting involved
wahnsinnig
in this
wertvoll
process,
ist
that
und auch für
this
mich
study abroad is very valuable, and that mental support is very important, and that needs more attention, because it is invisible. It is invisible what people have to go through, all the stress they have to suffer to enable for them to go abroad. So many of the things that have been mentioned, I fully agree with, and maybe at a later stage I can comment on
Vielen
that
Dank,
again.
Pfeiler. Danke,
Thank you, Ms.
dass Sie
Pfeiler.
das gesagt haben und dass
Thank you
Sie
for saying
mit
that,
auf dieser Bühne sind
and
heute.
thank
Juan,
you
I
for
hope
being
you
on
understood
our
everything
stage.
if the translation switched. So I saw you nodding, that's why I didn't
Yes, no,
jump.
I am super
Thank
happy.
you.
I promise that Cynthia and I didn't prepare this intervention before, so she backs my my points. It was not prepared, but I think that it was really powerful. Cynthia, thank you so much for sharing that, because in the end, that's the nice thing
Yeah.
about and the importance of research and data, right? That in the end, with our data, what we try to represent is the experience and the stories of students like Cynthia. And in the end, we like to do it that way, right? Because we should, these are numbers, but in the end, these numbers represent thousands of students like Cynthia that basically want to tell us their stories so we can work together for better mobilities for all. So also thank you so much for sharing it, because I believe it was really powerful and it complemented perfectly the data that we presented, and hopefully will inspire action across levels.
Juan, I got a question from the chat. Ich habe noch eine, sorry, I talked in English. I think that's easier than you have the understanding straight away. There's a question from the chat. If people, if interested people receive a PDF copy of your slides,
Absolutely.
if you are willing to share
Absolutely.
your
I have
slides, so we can give it to the organizers and
100%.
then we can organize.
I have just shared with you the report where the information comes from on the chat, but I will be sharing the presentation with everybody. You can see all the outputs of the SIM project on simproject.eu in the link, but also the specific presentation. I will also share it, so hopefully you can use it in your institutions and it can help to spread the word even more.
And I know you have to run one, so last question from the chat.
No worries,
You said
I
that
still have some time.
94% of the students feel like they need more information on funding. So what would be the best way to distribute this information and reach the students where they receive the relevant information? So really about the accessibility of the information. That's a question coming out of our chat.
Yes, well, exactly, right. And we saw the importance also in Cynthia's comment, right, of really understanding. It's about displaying it clearly. There was a discussion before on how now different social media channels are being used to promote information. It's really important that in the Erasmus section of the website of the university, there is some kind of calculator that is fundamental, as we have developed. I can tell you that the code is not really difficult, following the model that we did. So having that kind of calculator is the best way forward. And also trying to, of course, populate with information the Erasmus Plus app. It's a really powerful way of centralizing information. As you know, institutions are encouraged to use the Erasmus Plus app to disseminate information about Erasmus, and why not playing with this kind of information also through social media channels, Instagram stories that are always available, that are featured in the page of the university. Why not even being creative and doing some TikToks, right? In the end, with information or perspective is the more the merrier, and the more channels the merrier. And also, why not getting students to explain a bit how it works? So it has this peer-to-peer component, right? But in general, as a bottom line, always a clear kind of calculator, because as you know, grant levels change depending on the hosting country and depending on the perspective. That can be developed hopefully by IT teams quite easily, and that can help the students quite a lot.
Thank you very much, Juan, for joining us today. Vielen Dank fürs Mit dabei sein heute. Danke auch
Thank you so
fürs
much.
weiter erklären.
Thank you also for giving further explanations, and thank you for answering the
Thank you.
questions.
Digitaler Applaus.
Thank you so much.
Digital applause.
Thank you so much.